in the early church a wide array of different gospels, that there weren't just 4 gospels that were composed. There were literally dozens of gospels that were composed. The value of the Nag Hammadi find and other related kinds of discoveries like that is now we have an idea of what those gospels were like. And we have some other fragments here and there, some little citations that turn up in the church fathers and the church mothers, you know, and so on. But it is clear that there were a wide variety of gospels that later on the leaders of the Christian church picked out 4 as being authoritative. But beyond those 4, there are many other gospels with different points of view. The main problem for human beings is ignorance. We don't really know who we are, and we may not really know God. And so to eradicate that kind of ignorance, we need knowledge. We need to learn something, you know. And the secret of gnosis, the secret of knowledge, is that we actually have that knowledge inside of us. We need to be awakened to the knowledge that we have within. And then when we get to know ourselves, we have a kind of a flash of insight, and we recognize that we are connected to God. And then that connection between God and a human being becomes a rich and a liberating kind of connection. I believe that arguably the most significant document that came out at this time was in fact composed by Athanasius in the year 367. He had a festal letter that he had published. He had it read in all the churches of Egypt and in the monasteries and so on in 367. And in that letter he said, if you want to know what is worth reading, if you want to know what are the authoritative texts, soon to be the canonical texts, here's the list of what you should be reading. And lo and behold, as far as we know, this may have been the first list that fits exactly the table of contents of the New Testament Gospels and other documents that finally carry the day. So he said, if you want to read something, this is what you should be reading. And as for the other stuff that's different, it's going to poison your mind. It's going to falsify your thinking. And so this may have been the time when the Nag Hammadi texts were buried, as a matter of fact. It may be that the Nag Hammadi texts were in the hands of Christian monks. But when Archbishop Athanasius spoke out, they couldn't go against his will. The Gospel of Thomas is fascinating. It's a gospel that has a lot of similarities to the New Testament Gospels and a lot of dissimilarities. To begin with, it's not a gospel of the cross. All 4 New Testament Gospels are Gospels of the cross. That is, the story of Jesus ends in the crucifixion and sometimes in a resurrection after that. But the cross is really the point of the gospel story in all 4 New Testament Gospels. And that's not the way it is in the Gospel of Thomas. The Gospel of Thomas is a gospel of wisdom. Jesus is a teacher of wisdom. And in fact, Jesus is called the living Jesus at the beginning of the gospel. But he's not the living Jesus because he rose from the dead on the 3rd day. There is no resurrection in the Gospel of Thomas. He's the living Jesus because he lives through his words. He lives through the stories that he tells.
الكتاب المسمى بإنجيل توما أو توماس عبارة عن مجموعة من الأقوال سموها اللوجيا، حوالي 137 قول. في الأقوال دي شبيهة بأمثلة المسيح اللي موجودة في إنجيل القديس متى. هي طبعا مأخوذة عن التقليد الشفوي اللي انتقل عن المسيح، لكن واضح إن فيها تعبيرات غنوصية أضافها الغنوصيين على هذا التقليد الشفوي اللي نقلوه، فحطوا فيها بعض الأفكار اللي بتأيد فكرهم.
The debate about when Gospels are written is an ongoing debate. That applies to New Testament Gospels and all the other Gospels that didn't make the cut into the New Testament. And depending on your theological point of view, and depending on the kind of value you want to place on a Gospel like the Gospel of Thomas, you may find the arguments for an early date or a later date to be compelling. And so for those people that want to minimize the importance of the Gospel of Thomas, they usually apply a later date.
المسيحية طبعا في الأولى كانت بتؤمن على أساس أن الله واحد وله كلمته وروحه، الآب والابن والروح القدس. لما بدأوا يتبحثوا ويدرسوا الذات الإلهية ويعملوا تعريفات الكتاب المقدس بدأ يظهر تعبير الثالوث. فلما يبقى مش موجود في كل العهد الجديد وموجود في إنجيل توما، فالتعبير بدأ استخدامه حوالي سنة 150 وفيما بعد. فده معناه ان الكتاب اصلا مكتوب بعد التاريخ ده يعني.
We have some Greek fragments that come from the Gospel of Thomas, and the Greek fragments seem datable to the 2nd century. So now we're getting back beyond the Coptic translation in the Nag Hammadi library. I believe that there are elements in the Gospel of Thomas that are extremely early. In fact, in looking at some of the sayings that are similar between the Gospel of Thomas and New Testament Gospel sayings, sometimes it looks as if the form of the saying and the content of the saying in the Gospel of Thomas may predate what we have in the New Testament. But as a collection, it probably was put together a little bit later. So I believe that there are things in the Gospel of Thomas that take us back into the 1st century.
في القرن الأول لم يكتب غير الأناجيل الأربعة، إنجيل القديس متى، الإنجيل القديس مرقس، الإنجيل القديس لوقا، ودول اتكتبوا ما بين سنة 50 و 68 ميلادية. فيما عدا كتابات القديس يوحنا دي اتكتبت في الفترة من 75 ميلادية ل 95 ميلادية.
And one of the things that I see is that in the middle of the 1st century, the Apostle Paul, writing some letters to churches around the Mediterranean, cites in 1 Corinthians something that is very much like a saying in the Gospel of Thomas. And he cites it as what his sort of mystical, spiritualist opponents are referring to. So it looks as if we have some things that may be very early, in fact, in the Gospel of Thomas.
القضية بين الكتب القانونية وغير القانونية هو من الذي صلب. الكتب القانونية تقول أنه المسيح بنفسه. الكتب الأخرى تقول أنه شخص شبيه أو بديل له أرسل من السماء.
من بين ال 52 كتاب اللي في 13 مجلد أو مخطوطة الخاصة بنجا حمادي، هناك بعض الكتب التي ذكرت أن ليس المسيح هو الذي تم صلبه ولكن سمعان القيرواني الذي تم صلبه.
لا يوجد كتاب من كتب الأبوكريفة قال إن الذي صلب شبيه للمسيح، إنما قالوا إن المسيح كان خيال، بالتالي صلبه كان خيال، كانوا شايفينه بيتصلب وشايفينه بيسفك الدم وشايفينه بيتألم، لكن عمليا لأنه إله فكان ظاهر لهم كده، لكن عمليا ما كانش ممكن يتصلب، لكن ما قالوش ان اخر صلب بدلا منه.
حاشا لي ان افتخر الا بصليب ربي ويسوع المسيح، لا كذلك انا حاطه على ايدي، واي واحد مسيحي بتلاقي حاطط الصليب ده هو ايه؟ اشاره ان هو مسيحي، بيوري العالم كله ان هو مسيحي. ده الصليب اللي هو بتاع ربنا اللي اتصلب عشانه.
Now the statement that comes out of the revelation of Peter is, I think, especially interesting. In this particular statement, it is suggested that Peter and Jesus are having a conversation together, and Jesus raises the issue of the crucifixion. And Peter is very concerned about this and is getting a little nervous and worried and so on. And then Jesus interprets what the crucifixion actually is in words that are rather striking and rather amazing. When he said this, that is, when Jesus is explaining all of this, I, that is Peter, saw him apparently being arrested by them. I said, this is like a vision that is going on that Peter sees. I said, what do I see, Lord? Is it really you they are seizing? And are you holding on to me? And who is the one smiling and laughing above the cross? Is it someone else whose feet and hands they are hammering? And then Jesus said to Peter, the one you see smiling and laughing above the cross is the living Jesus. The real Jesus, the living Jesus, is not being crucified, but is like a spiritual being above the cross. The one into whose hands and feet they are driving nails is his fleshly part, the substitute for him. They are putting to shame the one who came into being in the likeness of the living Jesus. It's not the living Jesus. It's not Jesus who is being crucified in this text. It's the likeness of Jesus. Look at him and look at me, as if to say, look at the difference between him and me. The one on the cross who is crucified, And look at me, Jesus, who is not crucified at all. In the revelation of Peter, Jesus is not crucified. The real Jesus is not put on the cross. Does Christian theology really need to have, does it wish to have, this image of an angry God who needs to have some kind of a sacrifice? And not just an animal sacrifice, but a human sacrifice? And not just a human sacrifice, but the sacrifice of, as he is called, the Son of God, his own Son? I mean, is that really what Christians want to say about the Christian gospel? And so there are progressive Christians that are discussing this very matter. And it's in this kind of a context that some of the perspectives of the Gnostic Gospels could have some creative input into that discussion. Sometimes I like to speculate, I think we all like to speculate, what would have happened if these texts that are spiritual texts, what if they had carried the day? What if they were part of a canon? What if they were thought to be authoritative? Would they have made a difference? And I think the answer is, of course they would have made a difference. And I think that those who had read the text, people in the church, for instance, in the Christian church, would have likely been more mystical. They wouldn't have been so geared into crucifixion as being the center of the gospel. But they would have seen Jesus as a prophet and as a teacher who has great wisdom to communicate, wisdom with which we can resonate